I want to welcome everyone. My name is Lucinda Steiner. I've been with the center. I've actually been the director for the past, I think, 4 or 5 years. I lost track, and now in an advisory capacity. And you may all already know Valerie Hill. She's on the call, but she and our other team member, Luli, are now co-directors. So I just want to make sure you all know Valerie. And I'm going to share my screen and do a quick introduction to the center. And for some of you, you could probably give the presentation, but for those of you that might be new to the center, I'll just give you a quick introduction and then we'll move on to our speakers. So first of all, welcome to everyone, and let's get this in the right format. So we host these virtual roundtables. We aim to do it a couple times a year. Of course, COVID threw it off a little bit, but I think it was probably almost a year ago that we did one. So we're really pleased to be doing this again. If you're not familiar with the center, we are a physical space in Coral Gables. We're a vibrant hub. We hope to be more vibrant in the future than over the past few months. And we amplify the impact of change makers by promoting growth, collaboration, and wellness through shared resources and innovative programming. And that, of course, has continued just in a different way over the past year. And I know we're all excited to return. Our space is open, but we look forward to doing more in-person events as it allows. Otherwise, the virtual is working out great, and we're happy to have everyone participate. So how we serve change makers in the community. We offer membership, which I'll share a little bit more about. We also offer meeting and event space, trainings and workshops, and services. All of these services are open to the general public. You don't have to be a member. So events like today are open to anyone and everyone, and our services and trainings and workshops are as well. The services we offer include bookkeeping, grant research, and writing, thanks to Lorinda and her team, and we offer fiscal sponsorship. So if you are active with a project and do not have 501c3 status, but would like to join us as a fiscal sponsored project, just reach out to us and we can share more about what that means. And if you want to be part of our community, we certainly invite you to join us. We have various levels of membership. If you need space, everything from if you just need a mailbox to if you need a more extensive office space, we can meet your needs in all of those ways. And our membership includes capacity building programs similar to this and other workshops and trainings. We have a big emphasis on wellness. So we'd like to keep you all healthy and well while you're doing amazing work in the community, and then our socials and networking. And Valerie handles our membership, so you can always reach out to her. So like I mentioned, Valerie and Luli are our co-directors, and we've worked together over the past few years, so this is a natural transition to hand things over to them. And Valerie handles operations and membership. She's on the call, so she might be waving. I know she's there somewhere, so and many of you know her. So Valerie handles our operations and membership, and Luli handles our finance and many of our services, including fiscal sponsorship. So feel free to reach out to them. I should have put their emails there. I did not, but Valerie could probably put them in the chat. And these are all the ways you can connect with us over our social media channels, of course. And if you drop an email to Sarah, who's on the call, she'll add you to our newsletter so you can hear more about upcoming events such as today. So that's all I'm gonna share with you. So I'm gonna hand things over to Lorinda, and we have a long-standing partnership with Lorinda and her company, Grants Inc., to on many levels, but to also do events like this. And really want to thank our presenters and our panelists for being here today. We have great long-standing relationships with them as well, so we're always really, really honored and pleased to have them commit their time and share with you more about their priorities, and especially again in the past year, how things have changed, and provide a venue for you all to interact with them directly. So I'm going to hand it over to Lorinda.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucinda. It's so great to have everybody here. It has been a while since we've done these events. We used to do them, so I'm really excited that we get to chat today. And also a thank you to the funders. Today we have 3 with us. And just overall, thank you so much for being here and really being a voice to the community and being able to talk to everybody and just kind of give us some information on your perspective. I think it's so important for funders to be present, and it's so great that we have 3 here today, because sometimes, especially when you're seeking grant funds or support for your nonprofit or your project, I've seen a lot of people feel disconnected and they feel like the funders are on this, high mountain somewhere and they're not reachable. And I think it's just so great to bring us together, be able to communicate and realize that we're all people and we're all here for very similar causes. So today we have 3 people. We have Alex from Miami Foundation. So excited to see you. We also have Raul Moaz, which is going to be here in a little bit, from the Knight Foundation. And then we have Donovan Leeson, who's from the Children's Trust. So if we could start, let's start with Alex. How are you doing, Alex?
Hi there. I am really happy to share this digital space. I know it's well, the new normal, right, as they say, but happy to say a little bit about me. I'm one of the programs associates at the Miami Foundation, and in that role, I support and lead some of our grant-making opportunities and initiatives, as well as our scholarship offerings for students in Miami-Dade. Also just really hold space to appreciate and be grateful for our relationship with the Center for Social Change. We often enthusiastically refer nonprofits to Center for Social Change to tap into the resources and networks that they offer. So really happy to be here.
Awesome. So glad to have you. It's so good to see a familiar face. So next we have Donovan. How are you doing, Donovan?
I am well. Good afternoon, everyone. Donovan Leeson here from the Children's Trust. We are excited to be here and participate in this conversation, and just know that I am sure many of you can find a partner in the Children's Trust.
Awesome. Great to know. Great to have you. And then Raul, I believe you're here as well.
Hey folks, great to be with you. Raul Moaz. I have the pleasure of being part of the Knight Foundation team here in Miami, and I work with many of the folks on this call in making our city a better place, specifically through our tech and entrepreneurship community.
Awesome. So glad to have you. So glad to have you here. So to get started, we'll start with Alex again. Alex, it's great to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about your role at the Miami Foundation, a little bit in more detail, and also tell us a little bit about yourself. What's something that you personally are really into? Because I'd love for us to get to know you as a person.
Okay, well, so as one of the programs associated with the foundation, I have the pleasure of really helping support and lead our grant-making opportunities and programs. What that means is that I work closely with the team from iteration stage to implementation stage on what our big signature grant programs are. So one of them is our community grants program. That's our biggest offering for community and nonprofits, to even smaller special initiatives like the LGBTQ Community Fund, which is a partnership with the National LGBTQ Task Force, and even our 2 partnership relationships with the State Attorney's Office, that one of them is Denise Moon Memorial Fund and the other one is the Safer and Healthier Community Fund. And so in that role, I am really happy to be really to have conversations with nonprofits. That is one of the most fundamental core things of what I do and what I'm proud of. Being able to introduce them to our programs, of course, and seeing how they fit into our bigger and broader priorities. I love connecting them as well. There's so much work, and a lot of folks are doing great work in community. And facilitating in partnerships and being able to introduce nonprofits to each other, I think, is also one of the big rewarding aspects of the job. And then also really manage our scholarship offerings to students. This is not really a big known part of the Miami Foundation, but we do offer scholarship programs for Miami-Dade students who are interested in pursuing a college education. And so a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm.
I love film. I love going to the movies. Love enjoying our parks, our beaches. Personally, these days, I guess 2020 has really made me into kind of a homebody in some ways. So
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm genuine when I say that I still love those things, but there was a time that I remember that I really love those things. But slowly but surely coming out and re-exploring Miami-Dade. But you can find me really just relaxing at home many of the times, hanging with family. Family is really close to me and my close friends. So
Awesome, awesome. It's so interesting what you said about re-exploring Miami. I found that I'm doing that as well recently. It's like now that we're not out and about, we're more homebody, right? We're seeing the beauty of what's around us. And we actually, the Underline, I live in the Brickell area. So the Underline, is brand, it just opened up in this area. And I've spent a lot of time in that area just looking at it, looking at the parks and all this, the pretty things that we have that we just didn't see before. So it's kind of like the other side of all this.
exactly.
Absolutely awesome. So next, Donovan, if you could just tell us a little bit more in detail about your role, about what you do with the Children's Trust, and then tell us a little bit about you, your interests, and a little bit about you personally.
Sure. Well, I am our Chief Public Policy and Engagement Officer here at the Trust. And what that basically means is I manage our public policy portfolio as well as our civic and community engagement portfolios. In addition to that, I manage our work, which we call funder collaboration, assets and resources from multiple funders, and try to direct those efforts towards a single set of outcomes. A little bit about the Children's Trust. We have a large board, which they're equally as happy for me to participate here with our CEO, Jim Hodge, and our chairman of the board, Ken Hoffman. But our programs, our funding supports youth development programs, early childhood programs, health programs, parenting programs and supports, programs for families who are experiencing multiple stressors in their household or their neighborhoods. We have a significant effort around community awareness and advocacy, as well as providing program and professional supports for those organizations and their staff in any one area. Little bit about me. What am I passionate about? I'm passionate about Miami, this place that we've called home for so long, and well, much with its beauty and its complexity and a little bit of its craziness, depending on what intersection you're sitting at a red light while somebody zooms by you. But I'll take all of it. And so that's just, I guess, the summary of my work and what we do here, what I do at the Trust. And we're really interested in just figuring out how we can, participate further in our community, work with other folks who are trying to do the good work.
Awesome, awesome. Great to have you. Good to have another person that enjoys all the beauty and the craziness of Miami. I think that's the best way to explain the city. I've been here 7 years personally, and I love it. I don't think I want to live anywhere else. It's pretty cool. It's a good space. So now, Raul, if you could please also give us a little bit more information, a little bit more in depth about what you do with the Knight Center Foundation, with the Knight Foundation, and also tell us about you, what your interests are, things like that.
Sure. Wonderful to be with you all, and really inspired by the energy and the folks and the passion in this room. So at Knight Foundation, I'm part of the team that leads our community program here in Miami. And our focus for about 7-8 years now has been building up the city's tech and startup community. And so for all the folks in Miami and elsewhere, but particularly those who are here who want to build an amazing company, want to change the world through tech, through venture, through a startup, and who want to do it here, right? Who want to contribute to the life of Miami, to the future of our city, and want to do that here. We are seeking to support them and their aspirations. And so we've very early on kind of entered the arena, if you will, recognizing that there was already a community there, right? We were looking to accelerate an organic trend that had already manifested itself and wanted to give it more energy, more form, always following the directive of community, right? Knight Foundation as an organization is a catalyzing force, or seeks to be a catalyzing investor, social investor really, in its work, not kind of prescribing what community should look like, but rather elevating the voices that are coming from community and giving folks kind of the space to run the resources to create and to build. And so when we got on this journey about 7-8 years ago, the focus really was on connecting folks, on helping to build a sense of attachment to place, a sense of community among those who are in the space. And that growth and that program has evolved as community has evolved, as community has grown, so too has the Knight Foundation's community. Most recently in February, we announced a slate of grants to FIU, and Baptist, all towards the orientation of building up the city's capacity to produce engineers, computer science and data science kind of majors, folks with those disciplines. Because we had heard from community twice over, from companies in the market, from companies who were hiring, saying we need more and more competitive talent, and from Miamians saying, I want to participate, I want to be here, I want to stay in Miami, I want to study here, right? I want to go to school here, I want to get a job in tech here, but I'm not sure if there's a path for me. We had heard from them as well that they wanted to be part of this, and so that really has become kind of, if you will, the first page in a new chapter in this journey. What started off literally investing in Miami's first co-working space in 2012 and the first tech conference in the city in 2012, 2013, to now in 2021 be at a point where the institutions of the city are really rallying behind the idea of Miami as a home for tech entrepreneurship, where Miamians are excited about it, and then there's a lot of also national and international attention about the ethos of this place, right? I think for a long time, folks kind of maybe discounted Miami and didn't see our attributes as assets, right? But for the maker class, for the creative class, for the entrepreneurial class, the idea that Miami is full of first generation Americans, right? That is a huge asset, because there's people who are gritty and are hungry and are persevering, right? The idea that Miami is only really 70 years old since things kind of really started to take off here, that's amazing, because anybody can kind of get out of their car, get off the plane or what have you, and start building. And so really our assets, our attributes are really being recognized as assets in this context now more than ever before. And that's also incredibly energizing for us, but also for folks, for ordinary everyday Miamians who are seeking to build their lives and their careers here.
Yes, yes. So excited. There's so much potential here. And I love to hear how there's so much support, from our local nonprofits, right, that are really supporting, but also from you all, from the funders, from the larger perspective. And it's beautiful to see the collaboration. I think it's something that about Miami in general that I've seen is just different in a lot of ways. It's more, like you said, it's more gritty. It's more, what are we doing? Like, what groundwork can we do? How can we support these grassroots efforts to really make this real change? So that's super exciting. So tell us a little bit about you, your personal interests, things that you're passionate about.
I'm usually chasing or being chased by a 3-year-old at home. And that takes up a lot of my free time. I've set a goal for this year of restoring, refurbishing, rehabbing 2 pieces of furniture. And so I'm currently taking about a 1950s beautiful kind of chair and bringing it back to life. And so that's a hobby and an interest of mine. And I've set the number at 2 just because realistically, that's what I can probably get across here. Enjoy anything food related cooking. I've missed out terribly on the last year for me, for my family. The dinner table, and really the table as a whole, is such an important meeting place where we share, connect, are vulnerable, are honest with each other, have deep convos for friends and family. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of hopefully the summer being able to gather folks again in person over a good plate of really anything, honestly.
Sounds great. Sounds great. It's making me hungry. Sounds super delicious. Awesome. So my next question is going to be, I would love to know a little bit about the individual foundations as far as what your true mission is, because there are some misconceptions related to what foundations do and what their mission is. Like, for example, Raul was just discussing what the Knight Foundation is doing, but what a lot of people think is that it's only arts. So they're thinking paintings, they're thinking sculptures, things of that nature. So if we could just kind of take a step back and pretend like none of us know anything about your foundation, and tell us what the true mission and vision is of the organization. And if we could we'll start with Alex and then move around.
Absolutely. So really at the Miami Foundation, 2020 was kind of a mission affirming, mission altering year in many ways, right? We became kind of the civic leadership and philanthropic backbone for the community. And that's how we want to be seen. And we do this through by being leaders in crisis, by being leaders in times of recovery. We have helped donors invest in nonprofits. We've helped nonprofits invest in leadership, invest in their programming across a wide range of issues. And so last year, as an example to that, we were privileged to manage and administer a $10 million program that was designed to help nonprofits recover or really pivot in during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic. Many nonprofits struggled to make rent or secure space, or with technological shifts in their programming, and we were happy to be that partner. Similarly, we took a really bold stance with our new leadership in June with our Racial Equity Fund. We were able to establish the Racial Equity Fund seed with our own money, leverage those funds by securing corporate partners this time around. But it was quite a journey by investing in nonprofits who are at the front line, delivering community-focused grassroots work, all the way to investing in individuals. And now we're really focused on systemic issues and who are the organizations that are focused on trying to transform conditions and trying to really just change systems in order to create the greater good. And so when you think about what the mission of the foundation is, I would say that it's a constant state of learning, but we are dedicated and committed to this idea of being that civic philanthropic backbone of Miami. And we have done this through even supporting candidate forums and being a thought partner during election season. We have offered ourselves as a resource for nonprofits to seek support, and we've done that with community grant programs. Again, our annual grant program that is offered to nonprofits who are either working in the youth space, in the family space, and environment, or even in economic issues. So when you ask like what our mission is, I would say it's a lot of it is transforming and working with community, working with donors, working with leaders to make sure that we really converge on a common set of issues.
Yes, yes. And I can testament to that as well. Even that's how Alex and I think we first met at a class. And then after, they actually invited me out to their offices. This is right before the pandemic. And it was just to ask me, tell us, you're the voice of nonprofits, what do they need? And that to me was a really great experience, because I was able to very openly share, like, these are the things that the nonprofits we're serving are struggling with. These are the things that they're seeing. This is what they feel. And I even found just in that time frame that you all are so great at saying, okay, let's do more. Let's serve these people the way they need. Let's communicate more. And I think that's just a really beautiful thing that I've seen with the Miami Foundation, is that, you really think outside the box. And like you said, you meet people and you meet nonprofits where they are. What are the current issues going on? What can we do to work together, moving forward? So I think that's super great, super great. Awesome. So Donovan, now your turn. I've actually very rarely had an opportunity to talk to anybody from the Children's Trust directly. Usually it's just paperwork. So tell me a little bit about the mission, the true mission, the focus, the vision, what the Children's Trust seeks to do in the future.
Sure. So our true mission is to support children and families across Miami-Dade County, right? And how we live that out is we make grants for programs. And, last year, the 2019-2020 fiscal year, we invested about $152 million in programs that support children and families all over the county. That results in, making grants to a little bit over 400 different organizations across the county, and they serve in turn collectively close to 350,000 households with children. So all of our programs and services that we support and all of our initiatives are rooted in serving the children and their families primarily. But there's a lot more to it than just paying or making a grant for a service, right?
Mhm.
There's also looking at how our ecosystem reacts and acts with the influence of policies being made locally, at the state level, or federally. And part of also what we do is support programs and support organizations that advocate for children and family-friendly policy. In addition to that, many folks will think, well, you have to have a certain budget or an audit and different things to apply for funding for the Children's Trust. There are lots of opportunities if you visit our grants section of our website. There are grants that are open right now that support smaller organizations without an audit. And those grants support program enhancements, right? So it's an up and running program, but you need this extra thing to make, to make the sauce just right. And so that program enhancement funding helps to bring that extra thing to the table. The other part of the opportunity that's open is our advocacy part. And advocacy does not necessarily mean that you are lobbying for policy changes. It could mean that you're trying to make a change in your community, right? You're trying to improve the conditions in a neighborhood park, and you need both some sweat equity from the trust and others and our network, as well as some funding to get that over the top. So that's, we see advocacy as part of our civic engagement and kind of civic discipline agenda, right? In terms of making sure that this place that we all care about and love, and sometimes love to hate and then love again, that when our residents and our residents want and desire to inspire change in their neighborhoods, that we can support that. We can support that in many ways.
Awesome. And one thing I've noticed with the organization we worked with, the Receive Children's Trust funding, is that one thing that I like, on one side, people find it to be the application process to be taxing, right? There's a lot that's involved, but it allows it's such a good format, in my opinion, because it's so well thought out, and there's a lot of support, which I think is great, because I think people go into funding opportunities and they're a little bit confused and they don't know exactly how to approach it or whatnot. But I found that the website is very clear, that the workshops that are offered to approach funding, right, and go through the process, I think is also very clear and very supportive, which I think is also a testament to your foundation as well, right, that you're willing to provide the tools so that people can access the funding. And I think that's important, because sometimes there's this, like I mentioned before, disconnect between applicants, nonprofits or community organizations, and the funders. They think, oh, I can never get there. But there are foundations and that's one thing I find in Miami as well, the local ones, that they're willing to provide the guidance, the assistance, training, and education so that you can access those funds.
One of the things I would add is just, we recognize that running a nonprofit doesn't mean non-business.
Yes.
Right. Oftentimes when you're running a nonprofit, you have to have a higher degree of business acumen than a for-profit, because by virtue, you operate on the margin. And nonprofit, being a nonprofit is a tax designation. It's not a purpose designation or an operational designation. And so we want to make sure that our ecosystem is healthy and vibrant. And so as much as that we can help to do that, we try to.
Yes. So true. And I think that's where a lot of disconnect comes in, is that you have to run a nonprofit. It's a business. It's things that we communicate in a lot of our classes as well. So SCORE, I know we have SCORE on the call as well. They do some trainings, workshops on that as well. It's nonprofit, it's a business, and it has to run as such. So excellent point. And so Raul, let's talk to you a little bit. So I hear it all the time. The Knight Foundation only funds arts, which we know is not accurate and true. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the mission, about the vision, about what the purpose was initially for the Knight Foundation.
Sure. So the Knight Foundation manages the wealth of the Knight brothers left it. And the Knight brothers were newspaper guys. They believed that an informed and engaged citizenry was essential for the healthy functioning of our democratic republic and our democracy. And so our foundation's orientation, our whole mission, is to promote informed and engaged communities. And we do that in three distinct areas. So we're a national foundation, but we're fiercely local. And that means that we have a communities program, kind of this one pillar of our programmatic work, where we invest in the 26 cities where the Knight brothers once had a newspaper. Miami Herald, it was a Knight publication. And so the business was run out of here. And so the Knight Foundation is headquartered in Miami. And about 55 or so of our staff is in the greater Miami area. And so Miami is one of 26 cities where we have very active community program. And in each of those places, we're seeking out what's organic. We're seeking out what's actually happening in that place that we can accelerate. Philadelphia looks really different than San Jose, than Miami, than Biloxi, than Macon, than Gary, Indiana, right? Each of these places has their own flavor, their own hopes, their own aspirations, and their own things that are in the works. How can we accelerate what community really seeks out in each of these places? So that's one area where we're really active. We're also really active in the arts, which you mentioned. And that is because we believe, and kind of research has shown that the arts has this really unique ability to bring communities together, to bring folks together, to attach people to place and help folks understand it and relate to one another. And so if we're going to have an engaged community, our view very much is that the arts is kind of a critical infrastructure or part of the critical infrastructure of that engaged aspect of a city. And the last piece, which wouldn't surprise anybody, given the Knight's history, is that we fund journalism. We believe that a free, independent, objective press is essential for our democracy. We believe in the First Amendment and in the ability of a journalistic tradition and the power of a journalistic tradition to capacitate community and kind of our citizenry to really seek out its true interest. And so we fund, particularly of interest to us, we fund in our funding at the intersection of trust, media, and democracy, and especially so through local news. And so how can we enhance, how can we sustain, how can we improve and build upon our democracy by having strong, rich, vibrant communities, vibrant ecosystems of local news. It wouldn't surprise anyone here either that local news has taken a hit in the last decades. The business model for sustaining local news has completely been changed. And so we're actually seeing a country with what we call news desert, where there is no hometown paper, right? Where the Miami Herald and the Sun Sentinel wouldn't exist. And there really isn't anybody capturing what's happening. There isn't anybody holding power to account. There isn't anybody who's documenting and sharing out what's taking place in a city. And so we're really invested at the intersection of trust, media, democracy, especially through the lens of local news. We think that local news holds one of the biggest keys toward restoring trust in the institutions of our city and our country, and we're pretty kind of high on kind of the path forward there.
Awesome, how interesting, right? Such a different perspective than the idea that all you fund is the arts, right? There's so much more to it. I think this is why it's so important to talk, because it's, you know, we get to see that, to see what the path was, why you are where you are. I mean, I think that's incredible, because that just opens up different possibilities, right? Different possibilities, potential partnerships, potential, you know, like your focus points, and I always tell this to organizations as well, is you have to understand what the funder's perspective is. And that's why I asked the question, what is their mission? What are their initiatives? How do they want to see change in the community? How do they want to support it? And see if that aligns with the programs that the nonprofits have, right? Because that's where you get that beautiful connection. Because I think a lot of times organizations will kind of rack their brain applying to a funder because they saw, you know, dollar signs somewhere and they feel like this is a great idea, but sometimes it's not a good match. So I think it's so important to do research. And there was actually a study that was done quite some time ago, and the Kellogg Foundation had said that, you know, organizations need to do 10 times the research, you know, 10 more times the research than what they're doing in order to see if there's a match. And that's something that we always recommend as well, is really look at the funders. What's their mission? What are you trying to accomplish in the world? And how can we, you know, create that alignment between the two? And I feel like that's what creates a really good match between funder and organization versus just applying because you see the dollar sign. So that's super.
And if I could, I think there was a great conversation going on kind of right before around like, what size organization do you fund? I think on our end, and I see Alec, I see Lindsay as well from the Miami Foundation. At Knight, I think you're going to see everything and anything in between, right? In arts, huge funders of the New World Symphony, the Arts Center, the Pres Art Museum, institutions of the city's arts and cultural scene, Yet we're also one of the most active, if not the most active funder at the grassroots, at the earliest stages, at the risk capital stage. And so even if an organization doesn't have 501c3 status, what have you, hey, our friends at the Miami Foundation are indispensable to our work because they can help us then with the fiscal agency to meet folks where they're at. And so it really is incumbent on us as well, right? When the power favors the funder, the power dynamics favor the funder, it's really incumbent on us as well if we're going to be really good stewards of the funds that we've been entrusted, and good investors to seek out the social change we seek, to make sure that we're meeting folks where they're at. And the best ideas, the best teams aren't always wrapped in a 501c3. Right? They may be wrapped in many different legal and tax kind of structures. And so from our end, it really is about meeting folks where they're at, whether it's the aspirations the city holds or whether it's the form and the legal kind of structure they hold. So Knight goes from the risk capital stages where there may not be an entity. There actually may not even be an entity incorporated. It's a kind of a group of misfits that are out to change the world, and we're going to make a bet on those renegades to the institutions of a place that have those audited financials and the CFO and all that kind of stuff.
Excellent. That's a great question, and let's also pose that question to Donovan. So, what's the size of organization would you say that you support? How does that look for the Children's Trust?
It ranges, right? And, we have programs specifically for small community-based organizations. We have, I would caution to say that the majority of our portfolio supports organizations that have a financial audit. But that's not the only part of our portfolio. The other thing I would say is that you don't have to be a nonprofit to receive funding from the Children's Trust. You just have to be registered to do business in the state of Florida or have a fiscal agent. But the requirements for what we require in terms of business stuff, paperwork, right? Your audit, your list of your board members, this and that and the other. Those requirements really vary by the solicitation that's being put out, right? So, you have to remember that while Knight Foundation may be a private non-operating foundation, we are a public funder, meaning our money comes from taxpayer dollars. And so there is a different level of heightened scrutiny that happens at the local, state, and federal level as it pertains to our funds. In the history of the Children's Trust, we've never had an audit finding in 17 years. And that's why there's a heightened scrutiny depending on the amount of money you're applying for. If you're applying for $20,000, it's a much different bar than if you're applying for $1 million per year grant. Our grant cycles typically run 5 years. They used to be 3 years. We've extended them now to just about everything we fund to about 5 years. And so, in the real world, it would mean the difference if you're applying for a $20,000 grant, be $100,000 over 5 years versus $5 million over 5 years. And it's not just, the cities and the YMCA and the colleges that are getting the larger amounts of funding. Actually, 85% of our funding goes to community-based organizations. The rest is split among our universities, our municipalities, and others. But it really, as you see different opportunities are posted by the trust, you have to read the fine print and the bold print to see what qualifications you have to bring to the table.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Such good insight, right? To be able to see the differences between the two. And like Donovan mentioned, looking at the details, it's so important to, if you want to save paper, do it online. But if not, you print out those RFPs, and I go old school and I highlight them. And we look at all the different pieces. And this is kind of that prep work that I think is so important for organizations that are applying for funding, whatever type of funding it is, to really get into the nitty gritty. Like we mentioned before, figure out what the mission is of your funder. Is it in alignment? Can you really partner together? Does it make sense? And if it does, get into the RFP, which is like your actual grant application you're applying to, right? And get into paperwork and look at it. Look at the nitty gritty. And if you see that you're not a good fit now, that's okay. Maybe you're a good fit in 6 months. Maybe you're a good fit next year. It's so important to pre-plan for these things. It's something that that we encourage organizations to do, all the ones that we work with, is kind of this pre-planning stage, because that way you're well prepared for this, and then you'll be set up. So Alex, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Tell us about the organizations that you fund, the size and all of that.
No, for sure. And I think this is a really important discussion. I just want to say, for like the nonprofits who are there and, and who have, received a no, whether it's from the Miami Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Children's Trust, that really, and what no means often, and looking at our track record, no means not now. And in many ways, it's really about what our priorities are for this cycle. What are the nonprofits that we want to invest in? What kind of impact do we want to see for community? And so as a community foundation, as a private community foundation, we're always looking even beyond size. We're looking at what sort of programs, what sort of missions will yield the most positive dividends for community. And so this year, I think, was a really clear example of that, where we transparently published the metrics that we evaluated community grants applicants on. Everything from, collaboration with community, to sustainability, to even what progress or solutions indicators do you have for a given program or for the mission of your organization. And so in truth, it's really all sorts of organizations and all sorts of sizes have been funded by the Miami Foundation. A note about the relationship between funder and nonprofits. I mean, last year, the team and I, we led community conversations on how community grants should look like for the 2021 cycle. We had very frank, very vulnerable conversations with nonprofits, grantees, nonprofits that we haven't had a relationship with, somewhere in between, basically telling us, hey, look, here are the constraints that we think exist in not just the Miami Foundation, but really philanthropy in general. Here are the things that we're working on. This is what I would love for you to know about us. That way you can somehow integrate it into your guidelines. In this case, talking about nonprofit talking to us. And we listened to a lot of that feedback, and we were able to shift and be open to mission building support this year, for example, which is just a fancy way of saying general operating support. We have consideration for programmatic support as well. We were very intentional about neighborhoods, reaching out to neighborhoods. So we know that there's a service gap. There's often a gap between Deep South Dade, for example, and funder community. And so we made sure to build those bridges. We made sure to get on those calls in order to make sure that they were in our orbit now, and that they were aware that, look, the Miami Foundation exists and we have these offerings. We would love for you to take an office hour, which, Lorinda, I'm sure you tell this to anybody who comes to nonprofit, please take the office hour. Yes. as soon as that becomes available, because that's when what our priorities are. That's when where you can share your idea, you can share your vision with us. And so frankly, it's a lot. It's a big mix, right? It's a big mix of considerations for the funder, for the Miami Foundation. Generally, we have funded nonprofits with a track record of success and impact in Greater Miami, but we are always exploring our approaches, different options for approaches. And I would say that, again, going back to that magical 2020 year, it has really reoriented some of our priorities, and we really want to be focused on equity and focus on community, because as Audre Lorde said, right, there is no liberation without community. So
yes.
There's something really great, I think, that Alex said there on timing, right? Which is to say, though, he phrased it as like no may mean not now. And that's, I think, a really important kind of thing to keep in mind, the feedback loops. And so Knight just announced this funding towards FIU, and Baptist around building up schools, our engineering schools in town. And that worked. Like it wasn't that Knight one day woke up and said we should fund engineering schools in South Florida. There had been a years long, multi-year kind of ongoing kind of dialogue with community around where it wanted to go, right? And so we weren't ready, right? I don't think community, some of these institutions, Knight itself wasn't ready 3 years ago to say we're going to put $15 million into Miami-Dade, some of the higher ed kind of institutions of Miami-Dade County 8 weeks ago. We weren't ready 3 years ago to make that commitment, right? But so we would say no. We'd say, hey, this isn't for us just yet. But we heard and we would take no, and we said, all right, is there something shifting, right? Is momentum building in a different way? And so really, even the no, whether it's a not now or a more firm no, what have you, the feedback loop in and of itself is the important exercise, right? It's that community is expressing itself, and our role as social investors is to listen and internalize that, right? And so even if it's no, it's really not that we don't care or that the funder is not prioritizing that area. It's that we ourselves are also trying to discern, right, from the signal from the noise, like what's really happening, where's our actual momentum, where can we get past the tipping point in terms of social transformation, and that sometimes that takes a while. Sometimes for us, for example, in these grants, it took a while to work with academia. It took a while to get to the point where we can make 8-figure investments in higher ed. So all the conversations are good. All the conversations are important because they give us a data point. They give us a feedback loop around where communities' priorities are. And that really does shape strategy. It may not be immediate, it may not be in 6 days or 6 weeks, but it certainly shapes strategy in the long term.
And I think that's so great to just share that a no is not a bad thing, right? It's just like you said, a no, maybe just not right now. And I think a lot of organizations get kind of disheartened because they get a no and they say, oh, I have a terrible program. And, you know, we try to communicate that no, maybe you don't, maybe it's just not right now. It's not a bad thing. And I always find that the feedback that you get from a no, and that's something that we require actually when we onboard a new organization is, okay, give me all your no's. And they're usually very embarrassed to share them. And I say, no, that's how we learn and we see how we can adapt from it. And Donovan, what's your opinion on that? As far as, let's say an organization applies and they get a no, what would you say about that?
Right. So it's the same. I guess before I get to the heart of that answer, one cautionary note is not to conform your mission and vision to support a grant application.
Yes.
That even if you are awarded the grant in the beginning, it is going to be a bad deal for everybody involved, because you're not going to want to do what you weren't intending to do for, the next 3 to 5 years, just so you could take home, $2 in administrative cost.
Yes.
Right. Because grant funding is not free money. It's directed funding. It's for a particular purpose. And so the worst thing you can do is get yourself in the door in a situation that you don't like, because then it makes for a bad relationship between you and that funder. Mm-hmm. So getting back to no, if you apply for funding and, somehow it's not approved for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that equation is off the table, right? Often what we do after our application process is a competitive process, and we score one application and rate them and all this other stuff. But when that's all over and the dust is settled, any applicant is free to come back and circle back with our team, and we can go through your application and talk how come it scored this way? Why wasn't it a fit this time? And, sometimes we find organizations that, the idea they have would be great for the early childhood space, but they're applying for funding for older youth. But, because they have a fiscal gap in that year, but it doesn't set up for a great relationship. So, if you've brought your organizations this far, believe in your mission, vision, and purpose of the organization. There are other opportunities out there and other funders out there beyond Knight, beyond the Trust, beyond Miami Foundation. In fact, one of the ways, if you want to know about some of these other funders, the Children's Trust has invested over the past 6 years in bringing the Funder Information Network to all of our local libraries. That was a service that the Foundation Center, now Candid, used to support, where they have a database of all the funders in the country, what they support, what communities, how much they invest. They have sample applications, the works. That's usually a a fee-for-service kind of platform where if a nonprofit wanted to subscribe on their own, it probably cost them a few $1,000s a year. That's free of cost to anybody who wants to go to any of our regional public libraries and get connected to that site. It's paid for by the Children's Trust. We put it in the libraries, one, because it's a place where information is democratized. And so we wanted to be able to get that information out to as many folks as possible. Outside of COVID times, we held workshops on the database, and you didn't have to be a grantee of the Children's Trust. Any organization who has an interest in seeking grant funds can come to our workshops and learn more about the different resources that are out there and opportunities that may be a much better fit than trying to fit the square peg into a round hole. So I would just say, make sure that as you are thinking of seeking funding and you're looking at different sources, make sure that everything aligns. It aligns to a part that you're getting into a relationship that you want to be comfortable in the next handful of years.
Such great feedback, such great feedback. The FDO as a resource is incredible. That's something that we refer to people all the time. I've used myself as well, just, because I'm kind of a nerd. I like to be in the library back in the day, right? It's such a great resource. FDO is a tool that even us, that we do this all the time, we still use FDO. I mean, it's like the best resource that I found as far as comprehensive information. And like Donovan mentioned, there are many funders. There's something like over 100,000 funders in the country. I mean, there's plenty of different possibilities. And I think it's so great that that they funded that program. And again, I love what you said too. We need to focus on what your mission is. And again, do that research to see if you're in alignment. Don't change your programming, because that to me would be a nightmare, to be stuck in a 5-year program that you're not able to do what you said you're going to do just because you're chasing the money. There's plenty of other options. If it's not a good fit, move on to the next. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm going to open it up to questions, since we only have a few minutes left. And I just wanted to say, before we do open it up, thank you, all three of you, so much for being so open and communicative with talking with us. I found this to be very important, a lot of clarity and very open communication. And I hope that everyone that did attend really just sees that, funders are people. They're all here to help. We're all here for the same causes. So thank you so much for taking your time. So we'll go ahead and open up to questions if you want to unmute yourself or type it in the chat for the next few minutes.
As people are typing their questions or trying to prepare what they're going to say, I would just say that all funders are different. So a no from the Children's Trust doesn't necessarily mean a no from Knight Foundation or Miami Foundation, right?
Yes.
We have different interests and different charges. We have different boards with just different focus. And so what may be a fit for us may not be a fit for others, and vice versa.
Good point. Very good point. Very good point. So we have a question from James Eccles. How do you go about tracking return on investment over the long term? Looking in the 10 plus 20, 50-year term, how do you assess the long-term goals of reducing total poverty, increasing quality of life, happiness, and increasing the end knowledge level of children to adults? It's a very, very good question.
All right.
So
I'm not sure if that's directed at the group or just me or what, but
I think maybe you. I think that might be for you.
All right. Well, I'll take a stab at it. Well, we collect, if you've met any Children's Trust grantee, they'll tell you that we collect an awful amount of data. We collect participant level data on a daily basis, both intensity and duration of service, how long they're engaged with a particular program, pre and post tests. And we do this for every single program that we fund. And so, we are able to talk about the gains that children or their families have made that have been engaged in any Children's Trust program at any particular point in time. We, there are some reality moments of recognizing that certain programs have to, if they're cohort model programs, the cohorts have to be there longer than sometimes the grantee would wish, because that's what the data indicates. So, we take great pride in being able to report out. And if you look at our annual report that's out now in our short version as well, which you can find on our website, we talk about both initiative level results and program level results. And some of that we can provide at the census tract, the zip code level, or depending on the type of data at the block level.
Excellent, excellent. And the question was also for the other funders as well. If Alex or Raul have any feedback. So the general question is, how do you look at long-term, assessing long-term goals of reducing poverty, increasing quality of life, happiness, and also increasing the knowledge level of children all the way to adults?
I really appreciate the question. So for us, we've been able to really catalog a report called the Our Miami Report, which really is a thermometer on the civic and social service health of Greater Miami. And what we find is a lot of positives, but we also find a lot of opportunities. So for the Miami Foundation in particular, I think it's less of a matter of really the structure of that 10, 20, 50-year term progress, but we're really always looking to incorporate community feedback and monitor that progress and monitor the goals based on the grant periods. So for now, the grant period with our grantees is really 12 months, a year. And so there's every cycle, there are different considerations, and based on the previous performance and the reporting from that particular grantee, we often make a decision to either re-grant or to even shift our focus or shift our investments. So big ultimate answer to that question is really that we're constantly looking to invest in partners that do yield that community impact and that do create that impact, whether it's reducing poverty or tackling systemic issues. It's certainly something that we're constantly open and always learning.
Excellent, excellent. So then we have another question that popped in. It says, what are your recommendations? And this is for all three. Recommendations would be for new unfunded CBO to get local funding, community-based organizations.
I would say that if you are looking for funding, grant funding to get started, sometimes that's harder to do in our current economy, right? Because lots of folks have had some dings with COVID, loss of revenues, and different things. I would say make sure that you have a solid business plan that includes a mixed menu of revenue source. So that would be my kind of immediate short answer, and I'll kind of
diversify funding,
make way for others on the our colleagues on the call to make comment as well.
I would only add, I think in terms of age, I think what is of interest to a lot of folks is how proximate are you to the change you're seeking, right? How well do you understand the community or the folks that you're going to be working with to bring around this social transformation? And so the more insight, the more proximity you have to the folks you're working with, then I think the more kind of prepared you are to kind of do something about it, right? And so I think the advice would be around new. It's really, I think there's a question. It seems like there's the thread here is like, oh, we're unproven or the model is unproven. Well, I think the way you kind of overcome that is to show proximity, like whether you call it subject matter expertise or proximity to the cause, proximity to the community, whatever it is, like that you understand something, you have a unique insight here that others don't have. I think that's at the beginning stage is probably the most important thing to demonstrate, is that you know something others don't, or you're able to take that knowledge that others don't have or maybe have, but implement it in a way that others can't because of your proximity to community.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Mm-hmm.
I would definitely add to what Raul said about proximity, because it really is oftentimes about partnerships. Again, a lot of the work that happens in community, nonprofits feel increasingly siloed often or separate, that they might be the only ones doing that kind of work, but really there's 2, 6, 10 organizations that are trying to do the same work that you are. And so for this cycle, for example, we really encourage partnership proposals, or 2 or 3 organizations to getting together and to really commit to the same program or the same vision and mission. Oftentimes that means zeroing in on a focus on a particular goal, or what you want to see in the next whatever the timeline might be, but really zeroing in on that and then getting everyone's expertise, everyone's talents and skills together to make XYZ happen.
Absolutely. Partnerships are so important. And I think that's in the nonprofit sector, you know, you can kind of sometimes do more together than you can apart, right? So it makes perfect sense. The last question we have is actually going to be for Alex. The R Miami report was excellent. How often is that produced?
Yes, so we're actually currently in strategic planning process. So I know the last time the R Miami report was published was in 2016. We hope to reactivate something something similar or like the R Miami report. So I would say to just stay tuned.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. It's already 3 minutes past 3. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here and everyone for attending. There's a survey, I believe, in the chat. If you could fill that out for us, that would be wonderful. And again, thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you all very soon and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Florinda, for leading a
bringing
great
it together.
session.
Thank you all
and
so
thanks
much.
for all of you for coming and sharing your time and knowledge. It's great to see you all.